Okay, so I think the place to start with this chapter is All for One's speech about inexperience and this generation not understanding how outmatched they are and how much of a threat he really is, which pretty much is the typical spiel we all expect from All for One. But the interesting thing is how he's simultaneously right and wrong. As Inasa says as much that their generation may not know as much how much of a monster he was back in his golden era of villainy, and they probably never will. But that hasn't stopped this young crop of heroes from pushing forward, growing ever more determined and ever stronger for the sole purpose of defeating All for One. Like that has been everyone's sole goal from the very beginning, and just finally putting an end to All for One's legacy. Like any problems that happen in the future after All for One's defeated, they'll pretty much deal with them as they come. But in order for the world to really have a chance at a future, to really start from scratch all over again, All for One cannot continue to exist. And I do like how Horikoshi did manage to touch upon and like throw back to that very idea in this climax that yeah, if it isn't All for One, or even if it isn't just All for One or even just Izuku he's fighting, it isn't All for One or even just Izuku that's a part of this. He's fighting, All for One is fighting everyone. He's fighting everyone at this point. And again, I like how like it's emphasizing that it isn't just Izuku taking on this burden anymore. It is everyone has taken on the burden themselves of defeating All for One. Now, crossing over from that, obviously the big thing to talk about with this chapter is Tokoyami, and the fact we see everyone in some way or another creating like the perfect circumstance for Dark Shadow to completely overwhelm All for One. Now, I do think he's been defeated. Now, do I think he's been defeated after this chapter? Obviously not. But I think one of the more important things to come out of what Tokoyami did is, if you pay attention to All for One during this moment, it's the first time you've ever seen him show fear. The first time where it feels like he's afraid of something. And although that may not sound like anything important, or even after this chapter, it may not even seem like we made a new ground. But just the fact that Tokoyami was able to reach All for One at all in its own way exposes him to his morality. Like, it's that up to this point, All for One has perceived himself as some kind of god, some kind of untouchable, grand being. But ultimately, what Tokoyami did is he disproved that myth. He showed that yes, he can be touched. All for One can be touched. He's not untouchable. He's not invincible. He can be. You can throw everything you've got at him, and it's one of those things. It's one of those things that kind of harkens to one of my. It's one of those things that really harkens to one of my favorite quotes from Iron Man 2 of all films. If you can make God bleed, then people will cease to believe in him. And it's the same principle here. The fact that Tokoyami made All for One show fear exposes not only his morality, but also that he isn't just some unreachable god. It exposed even he has limitations. He's just very good at hiding those limitations. It's all about using those limitations to their advantage. And I especially like how they used Endeavor as an example of this, like pretty much citing how All for One can't just steal Endeavor's quirk through his flames. He actually has to touch the person, and it's the same deal with Tokoyami. He can't just steal Dark Shadow by absorbing the ability itself. He has to touch Tokoyami, which, in order to absorb Dark Shadow, which puts All for One at a disadvantage in both cases. And I really like how this chapter really gave Tokoyami his moment to shine, even if it's just for a moment. Like, it was just a really good chapter, like for Tokoyami in my mind. Aside from all that, though, we catch up a little bit with what's going on at the battlefield against Toga. However, it's very brief, and yeah, it's one of those. Not gonna lie, for as good as this chapter is for Tokoyami, the stuff I'm a little bit salty we couldn't have gotten a little more focus on on the stuff with Ochiko and Toga and all that, and especially Ochiko. Although again, I get why Horikoshi has limited himself to 15 pages a chapter nowadays, because I imagine he's probably overworked and like just every time he writes a chapter, I imagine he completely pushes himself beyond his limits. So I guess I can't fault him for that, and I imagine that with that being set up, it probably won't be too long before we address the whole Toga situation again. I just hope it's not too much longer of a wait, or that Ochiko gets shafted in the whole thing. Which yeah, I guess that is my biggest problem with this chapter, is because of the page count. It's another one of those where for the most part, it all of it is really good, but then there's that one moment that feels like it's just thrown in there last minute or something like that. Like something just it needed to be ended a little bit like sooner or later or whatnot. But again, other than that, like the chapter itself was really good. And one other thing I also really like about this chapter, it's a very small moment, but I really like how, getting back to the Tokoyami thing again, I really like how this chapter like it can, like pretty much subtly reinforced just Tokoyami and Hawks' bond. Like it's one thing that's been kind of, it's one of the, Hawks and Tokoyami's bond is something that has been kind of like built upon in little moments here and there and whatnot. But I really like how we really get to see just pretty much even more so than any. I like how this really feels like Tokoyami's moment to show Hawks what he's capable of, and almost like Hawks' moment to say to really appreciate Tokoyami in some way. Like it really it shows Hawks putting his faith in Tokoyami, I guess, is what I'm ultimately getting down to. But and yeah, it was just a really great moment for two characters who consider themselves brothers as well. Like I think that's the other thing I like about it, is that it's a moment that kind of cements what that brotherhood means to them, I guess you could say. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.